As a quick word of introduction, my name is Jasper Tanis. I'm working for Icorus and I'm responsible for the day-to-day coordination in this project. I will briefly introduce you this project and start the workshop, but not worry, you will see many other faces and other project team members this morning during the presentations. On the next slide, there is a brief housekeeping slide to start with. Today is meant to be a very interactive session with relatively short presentations where we present the results from the first 1.5 years of this project. I will introduce those presentations further in a bit. We have plenty of opportunity also for you to ask questions about the results that we present. You can write your questions down either in the chat and we will address them and we will answer them, or you can raise your hand and then we will give you the floor to introduce your question verbally. Kindly remind you to avoid background noise, to only turn your microphone off when you have been given the floor to raise a question, and please keep your microphone off when you don't have the floor and turn it on, obviously, when you are given the floor to ask a question or to make your point. We also have a number of questions for you, and we will ask your feedback and input to identify those aspects that you find important when it comes to the research that we will perform in the next 1.5 year remaining year of this project. As a brief word of introduction of this project, on the next slide, we're here talking about a green inlet ports study. This is a 3-year study commissioned by DG Move, by the European Commission, and started in November 2022. There are multiple objectives for this study, but the key objective of the study is to propose solutions for the implementation of green objectives, taking circumstances of TEN-T inlet ports and terminal operators into account. The study is implemented by a broad consortium. All the logos are here at the bottom of the slide by organizations who are very familiar with the IWT sector and with inlet ports. Those organizations are the consortium Icorus, CE Delft, Pantea, Prodenium, Erasmus University, Blanco, and EICB. Finally, it's also important to note here that we are, of course, not working in isolation, but also seek active interaction with other relevant projects, such as Multi-Reload, Magpie, and Pioneers. And of course, and that's today's session meant for stakeholders in the sector. If we further zoom into the project and its tasks, we see that the focus of the first 1.5 year has been on task 1, 2, and 3. I will briefly introduce those, and other speakers will later on this morning present you the results from those tasks in more detail. Task 1, to start with that, it has been focusing on creating an environmental benchmark to document the environmental impact from inland port activities. This was a task which was led by CE Delft, and they've developed a tool that should help you as an inland port or terminal operator to map your environmental performance. Today, this morning, Nicole Immels from CE Delft will give a very first sneak preview of this tool. It will be further developed the next couple of months and published in a user-friendly format on our website near the end of the summer. Today, we will seek your feedback on how this tool could be improved, how this tool could help you, of course, as an inland port, as a terminal operator, and what is required for this tool to make sure that it matches your needs. Then task 2. In task 2, a team under the lead of Blanco has collected and analyzed over 20 good practice examples from across Europe on urban and short-range IWT. Today, Max Wijnald from Blanco will present the analysis for those good practice examples, specifically focusing on the factors that have made those services successful. And here we also look for your feedback to determine what actually the rollout potential for these services will be across Europe. Then task 3 is focusing on digitalisation. For this task, a team under the lead of Prodenium has assessed the potential for further digitalisation of inland port operations. They have developed an inventory of digital application, and also here good practices have been analyzed. Robert Raphael will introduce these results in more detail. They will feed the next couple of months into a digitalization master plan and a self-assessment methodology. And therefore today, also here, we will be looking for your feedback to determine the potential of these applications and of course, to determine what will be needed for these digital applications to reach their full potential. Then finally, task 1, 2, and 3, they feed into task 4, which is the main task for next year in this project. The main objective of task 4 is to develop environmental and sustainable management systems, which are practical and easy to apply, and that should help inlet ports, terminal operators, other relevant stakeholders in the sector to become more sustainable, or should provide guidance to become more sustainable. This morning, Joanna from Pattaya will be presenting the first ideas developed in this project for these tools, for which we are, of course, looking for your input to develop it further. These tools, they will become more mature over the next couple of months until the start of next year. So until the start of 2025, when they should be tested in the number of pilot projects. Now on the next slide, you will see the agenda in more detail, including the timings. I will give in a minute the word to Turi Fiorito from AVIP, will kindly accept our invitation to briefly go over the main aspects of these topics from the perspective of AVIP. We will then have an opportunity for you to raise any early questions you might have. Then we will turn to Nicole, who will introduce the tool. Afterwards, we'll turn to Joanna, who will introduce the first ideas for the environmental and sustainable management system. We'll have a short coffee break, which is the opportunity between 11:10 and 11:20, which is the opportunity for you to get some coffee, water, anything you need. After that, Robert will present our task on digitalization, and Max will close off with the analysis done for the urban and short range IWT. So that's a short introduction of this project. We're very looking forward to our discussion with you today. Then without further ado at the moment, I would like to give the word to Turi on the next slide to give a quick welcome word on behalf of AVIP.
Thank you, Jasper. Good morning and welcome everyone. It is great to see that there are so many from my own AVIP membership, but also from the whole sector as a whole. Many of you I know, so it's nice to see you all digitally. Today we'll be covering a lot of important topics that we as AVIP also internally are struggling or thinking about a lot, because these are discussions that are setting out and defining the future of our industry. And as we had with a previous meeting with Ecoris in Belgrade, we have already been setting the stage. And the most important thing is that we keep speaking to each other and the different projects that we are doing. This is also why I'm very happy to see other initiatives here today. Our friends from Multi-Reload and Pioneer, which are doing a different but also similar work as this study has. So it's good to see that we are talking to each other and learning from each other as we continue, because coordination is important, not to do too much double work. At the same time, in AVIP, we are also looking at how do we already think about these things. As a couple of months ago in Paris, we had a workshop on climate reporting and other due diligence questions and how complicated that is. It's a bit outside of well, it's actually in the scope of this study as well, but only a certain segment of it. So it's good to see that we are all doing the same things. And I'm looking forward to, in the future, also organizing another meeting with Ecoris as the next steps of this study continue. Because, of course, in the coming years, the rules that are being implemented on environment and sustainability will come into force and might even end up becoming stricter or different than they are today. And studies such as this, with examples and different ways of working, are important for guiding us to the next step. So I'm very curious to hear from the different parts that I have not heard about, and also from the parts that I have heard about before, to see where they are today, and also to find out from all the members of AVIP that are here, to see what they already think and to find out if they can use it in their work either today or in the future. So with that, again, thank you all for being here. and looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Turi, for your words of introduction. Then I would like to turn to the next slide, where today you'll be given the opportunity to ask questions verbally, like I introduced. We'll also be asking some questions to you, both in written format as well as we're hoping to have a discussion with you. For this moment, we're inviting you to go to www.menti.com to scan the QR code, or go indeed to www.menti.com and use the code 62739572. This code should also be visible on the next slide, where you will see a first question, which is already being answered indeed, to get a little bit of a overview of the organizations that are present today. What type of organization are you representing today? So we kindly invite you to answer this question. This will also be the opportunity that if you have any early question, again, we'll introduce all of the topics in more detail. But if you have any early question, you are, of course, very welcome to raise your hand and to ask the question that you have at this stage. But if there are no hands raised, I propose we go to the next question, which is, what are your expectations for today's workshop? So we would like to learn a little bit from you what you would hope to be getting out of this workshop today, either to learn more about the results of the project, to, well, voice your opinion, to voice your view on what is needed to facilitate greening of inland ports, to better understand how you can contribute to the project, or whether there's any other reason for you to join. And obviously, also here you're invited to speak up if you want to. So thank you for your responses. This was meant to give a little bit of context before we really deep dive into the content and the presentation of our task results. If there are no hands raised or questions at this stage, which I believe is not the case, otherwise one of my colleagues, please interrupt me. Then I would like to give the floor to Nicole Immels from CE Delft, and Nicole will further introduce the tool, the first sneak preview of the tool that has been developed. And well, we'll be looking forward for your input and discussion on that. Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jasper. The next slide, thank you. Oh yeah. So I'm here with colleagues Anne and Roy from CU Delft, and we're working on task 1 of the Green Inland Ports project, which is about determining the environmental impact of inland ports, as Jasper had said. And we're also working on good practices, which means we're looking into what measures ports are currently using to reduce their environmental impact. And we're making we're gathering information on that such that other ports can learn from each other. And so this part is on a tool for environmental performance. Well, the goal of such a tool is on one hand to find hotspots. So where in the port are the largest emissions coming from, or the highest contributions to environmental impact. It's also a good starting point for monitoring. And you could also use a tool to verify what benefits or what reductions in emissions you can achieve by implementing good practices. The scope of the tool is the geographical area of a port. So we're looking at all the emissions, all the resource and energy use, all the waste generated that occurs within this area. And we're not only looking at a carbon footprint, but we're also looking at other environmental effects. For example, fine particulate matter, acidification, ecotoxicity, a list of indicators. Next slide, please. So how do we calculate the environmental impact? Initially, we started with a survey where we asked from ports, but also from literature. We looked into what are all the activities that occur in ports. And then we started to look into what are the emissions that occur at these activities. It's quite hard to find data on that. So eventually, we've used literature and databases on emissions that occur in all kinds of activities to make models for each type of activity that occurs in a port. And one of the main drivers of such a model is the energy consumption. So energy consumption, fuels, electricity use gives a good indicator of emissions that occur in an activity. Ideally, we also wanted to look into sound or noise generated, light, and also potential spills. But the focus now is on energy consumption because that's where we get the most data for. And so based on these emissions, you can eventually determine an environmental impact. And the method we use there is a life cycle analysis method, which is called RECIPE. And so that translates specific emissions, for example, greenhouse gases, into an environmental impact such as carbon footprint. So that's the principle behind the calculation of the impact in the tool. Then now, the next slide, please. An overview of actually what activities are included in the tool. So I'll actually start in the bottom. Of course, there's water in the port. There are vessels moving through the port. These we include. Then there are a number of waterbound activities. These are mainly the terminals. So we have a dry bulk terminal, a container terminal, a liquid bulk terminal, a passenger terminal, and a shipyard. And so you can fill in the tool for each of these terminal the degree to which activities are present. And then there's also a number of activities that happen not necessarily in every port, but they're also common in ports, which are the activities that are directly related to the waterbound activity at the top. So for example, power plants are common, all kinds of companies, production processing companies, chemical companies, warehousing, of course, oil refineries. There's also often waste treatment plants, wastewater, but also municipal waste. And there are all kinds of other office buildings as well. And then finally, all of these parties in the port have employees. And so we also include the commuting of employees. Next slide. So that's those are the different parts that are in the tool. And now I'll briefly introduce what the tool actually looks like. And so in the tool, you have an input part and a results part. And input part is categorized per module, as you saw on the previous slide. So for example, here you can see the input field for the parts on employees. So to determine the environmental impact of the employees. And the tool is structured such that you always have a compulsory part to fill in, which is a yellow field. And you have optional fields in green, which is more to specify more specifically for your port. Because the tool has a lot of assumptions, how we model these activities. And these are explained always in the column on the right. So for example, that an employee works for 48 weeks per year. Or that the employees work on site at the port and they don't work from home. And so if you don't want to use the default values, you can adjust that by filling in the green fields. So for example, the employees are assumed to commute by car. if that's not the case, then you can fill in, as was done in this example, that 75% of the employees commute by car and actually 20% commute by bike. And this will affect the eventual results. So this is a first input field. I have another example in the next slide, which is for the dry bulk terminal. So again, we have made assumptions on the total energy use of a dry bulk terminal. So that if you put in the yellow field the total dry bulk transshipped, the tool will calculate based on these default values what the total energy use is. So then you also, on the second line, you see total energy use available. There you put no, then it will use the default values. And then on the right is explained what the default values means. It means a certain diesel consumption, so certain total number of operating hours. And then again, in green fields below, you can specify, if you have data, what actually your diesel use or other fuel use is. Then in the next slide, you can see what the results look like. So on the left, you can see the results for the indicator global warming or carbon footprint for the whole port combined. So in this example, this port has a wastewater treatment plant, which contributes for about a third of the carbon footprint. But it also has a dry bulk terminal, which contributes quite a lot, and the cargo vessels that move through the port. So the graph on the left gives you an overview of the different terminals. And then the graph on the right, for each terminal or module, you can also see a breakdown where the impact is actually coming from. And so this result is linked to the previous slide, where based on default values, a total diesel use is estimated for cargo handling equipment. That's what CHE stands for. And so here you can see that basically because of the model here looks only at the diesel use. But now I'll show in the next slide what would happen if you would fill in the dry bulk terminal differently. So let's say you do have total energy use available. You actually have cargo handling equipment that uses diesel, but you've also electrified quite some equipment. So then you also add electricity use. Then this will affect the results, and you can see that right away as soon as you fill it in the tool. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you what that then changes. So now on the left, the total carbon footprint has decreased, and the dry bulk terminal has a lower carbon footprint. And now on the right, you can see where that carbon footprint comes from. And because now the port specified total electricity and total diesel use, you can actually see how each contributes to the total carbon footprint. So this is, this was to provide an overview of how the tool functions, how it's built. We're not going through each of all the modules that are present in the tool, but we're very curious to hear your feedback. So if you have any questions or feedback, please let us know. This was you can take it, Jasper.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Nicole. We have one hand raised from Magnus Bunning. Mr. Bunning, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Magnus Bunning. I'm here for the German Federation of Inland Ports. I have a question that I already asked in Belgrade. Ms. Immerich, your first slide shows that you take into account cargo vessels, but not railroad in general. Can you explain why?
You said not a real. We do take into account transport by rail or truck, but for 1 kilometer circumference around the geographical area of the port. So we just made a limit of, we just delimited what a port is. So cargo transport via rail or truck within the port is included.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? I think it does. Then maybe, Nicole, I would suggest we go to the next slide.
Yes. Yeah.
Here we would like to learn a little bit from you, specifically, of course, what is how this tool could potentially help you as an organization to determine your environmental performance, and then obviously as a follow-up, what will be needed or how the tool should be improved to make sure that it shows what you need in order for that to for that tool to be of actual use for you. Here you can type in your responses, but also here you are very welcome. Like Nicole already introduced, you're also very welcome to raise your hand and to take the floor. Specifically, we'd like to start a discussion with you, or we'd like to understand a little bit better from your perspective. What are the main elements that should be included in such a tool? What are the main requirements, main needs, main questions that should be answered? And then, of course, how this initiative that we are developing, this tool, could be of added value for you to create a benchmark. We're also speaking with other initiatives such as multi-reload, Magpie. Because we are aware that indeed in those projects tools are being developed as well, and obviously it's good not to work in isolation, but to seek let's say synergies and to look to which extent we're complementary to each other. I don't know, Nicole, do you have a couple of additional words on that from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good indeed. We're looking for feedback, and in particularly also for the default values, because so now many emissions are based on literature or environmental databases, but it would be good to have primary data to feed the tool, and the more primary data we receive, the more accurate the tool will eventually be. So that's something that we're looking for. So also, if you have any recommendations on sources for this data, then we'd also be happy to hear that.
Yeah, and then there are a number of challenges indeed, as you mentioned, such as how to determine the scope of the port, the geographical boundaries of the port, which emissions to account, which are, I think, challenges that a lot of participants in today's workshop will recognize. There's a question here, CCRD.
Yes, it could be a start for CSRD. But CSRD is, as far as I'm familiar, really specifically for your own emissions, and because it's using a lot of default values, it is an estimate. So for that, we would really need, again, more primary data to make it more accurate. But it would definitely be a starting point for that.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. If you do wish to follow up on that, feel free to raise your hand and ask your question in more detail. I think there's also one comment or feedback here. Standard tools should be available in particular for small inlet ports, covering all areas in question. Looks like a good tool. And I think that's one of our challenges as well, right? The many variations there are in the different inlet ports. There's also an important challenge for the task 4 on guidance. Joanna can speak about that a little bit further in a moment. But that is a specific challenge, of course. If you look at the right variation, not only in size, but also in terms of location and in terms of let's say the ownership model or how the port is constructed.
Yeah, I also see a question: will port clients be able to put in the data themselves? That is something we can design the tool for. The tricky thing is that we have to know what data is available and able to design the tool that it can be an input field. And so if you'd like to share with us what kind of data you have, then we can build the tool around that. Because for us, sometimes it's difficult to know, do ports have their total energy use? Do they have it specified for different categories within the pool? For example, do they know the fuel use of all their cargo handling equipment, or do they know how their employees commute, these kind of things? Because if we know that ports monitor this, then we can use it as input data. Yeah, that's indeed. I see another comment. The tool is difficult for landlord ports to fill in as they do not have or cannot collect a large part of the required data. Yes, that's indeed also something we encounter, that the data can be at parties in the port, but not available for the landlord. And then these high over models are more appropriate. But then if we can get the data from these individual parties, we could build that within the tool, such that also landlords of ports could use it.
Yeah. Other comments that you would like to comment upon, Nicole, before we go to the next slide, next question?
Maybe one more. I see many tools like this exist already. If you'd if we could hear which tools, because we have an overview, but maybe we don't have all of them yet on our radar, then it would also be very useful to hear what tools you've used before and why they are useful or maybe not, so that we can improve this tool.
Yeah, that would be me. Hi, everyone. I'm from the part of Switzerland. We're working with EcoSpeed at the moment, and this is quite a handy tool. It's very easy to use, and everyone. It would be possible that landlords as well as the port companies put in their own data. And I also wrote. It's usually the same values needed every time and everywhere, which is electricity, heat, fuels, and yeah, it's an easy tool. The results are super, like, visually very attractive, and that's what we need at the time.
Okay, good to know. EcoSpeed.
We'll have a look at that.
We'll look at it. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks indeed. Yeah, indeed, it's good to not work in isolation. So that's why indeed we said, okay, we're looking at other tools. We've spoken with Fraunhofer about the REF tool, and indeed, it's good to rather be complementary rather than to develop something which has already been developed. So thanks indeed. Maybe I can suggest to go to the next slide. Next question. Okay. Some of you might already have answered that question under the previous step, but one of the questions is also, or one of the suggestions is how we can further improve the calculation too. I think I just saw a message from Roy van den Berg in the chat, colleague of Nicole, that If you do wish to receive the tool, the CDelft team is happy to send it over for your feedback. And specifically, I think to look at the design, but also I think for the default values and how it can be made more robust. And then Nicole, if I'm missing something, please compliment.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it could also be if you saw in the overview of the parts in the tools, so the different terminals. If you think maybe we're missing something that happens in your port, that could be one way to improve the tool. The emission factors, there's a question about emission factors used in the tool. They're from the recipe methodology for lifecycle analysis. So to calculate from emissions into impacts. And the emissions itself are generally from EcoInvent. So that's also a large, commonly used database on environmental emissions.
Thanks, Nicole. There's one question in the chat. Shall we address that one? I wonder how much of those data will be imputed manually, automatically into the tools. So manually versus automatically, I think.
Yeah, that's well. I'd like to almost send it back. What would be the most useful? Because we could in theory make a very complex tool where you can put in all your primary data. But would that be the most user-friendly? Would it be nicer to have some default values, or maybe I'm wondering if that's actually the question. As in, is the question if you can automatically feed the tool with some default, some template data, or?
I think Ranasa wants to speak up, so please take the floor.
Rana?
If you're speaking, you're still muted. I'm sorry, we cannot hear you. I see you're unmuted, but there must be some sort of technical problem. Maybe we can follow up on your question bilaterally after the online workshop, unless it starts to work now. No, we still can't hear you. Shall we take one final suggestion, Nicole, on the Mentimeter responses?
Yes, indeed. I see a comment. The survey would have to be extended to harbor tenants. True. Yes. Yes, and we're trying to build a tool such that both a port authority and a tenant, an individual terminal, for example, could fill in the tool. But for that, yeah, we again, feedback would be very useful. But that is indeed the goal that we're striving for. And piloting in different port models and merging them, that is something that we've also been trying to do. But again, it's hard to find these pilot ports to work with.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And Rana has put a question in the chat. The ground for the query is work hours cost for manual input. That would add additional cost. So basically, the more you need to put in manually, the more additional cost there would be for filling it in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's okay. Yeah, that's yeah. We'll be finding a balance then in what are parameters to fill in manually and what is default. That yeah.
Yeah, and of course, and I think this is still part of your research, right? But there were the yellow fields and the green fields you introduced, whereas the yellow fields should be filled in, or the green fields were nice to have. But maybe some of these yellow fields, by using some data sources, can also be filled in automatically, indeed, and that would then reduce the effort that's needed on the side of the user.
Yeah.
Anna, you raised your hand.
Yes, but you already
Sorry.
I wanted to say so. Yeah, the user have two options: just using for every module the default value, but and then you get of course the results. But to be more specific, you can also add additional specific data specific to the terminal or the board. But that of course takes more time for the user to fill in the tool.
Yep, indeed. Thanks. I would suggest we go to the next slide. See if there are some final questions or points of. Sorry, then the next slide after this. See if there's some final questions or points of feedback on the two questions that are listed on the next slide. If Laila, you could please move one further. Thank you. The questions have already been introduced by Nicole, but okay, the validation of the default value, any conversation we can have, any follow-up, please reach out with us. If you still wish to speak up, ask questions, feel free to do so. And also indeed, of course, for the validation. So before we move to the next topic, this will define the opportunity to raise a question or to react to the two questions that are listed on the slide. If there are none, then thanks very much, Nicole, for your presentation. Thanks very much to all of you for your input. And then as the next topic on the agenda, I would like to give the word to Joanna from Pantea, who will introduce our first ideas for Task 4 on the environmental sustainable management systems, which is the most important task for this project next year, and for which we're currently doing the initial exploratory work. Joanna, the floor is yours.
Hi, Casper. Hi, Jasper. Hi to everybody. Thank you very much. As Jasper said, Task 4, it basically goes last. So we will take all the all that we learned from the previous tasks, what already Nicole presented about the tool, and also some very important lessons learned from best practices of green solutions that are implemented in various inland ports. And also what we will learn from task 3 and 2 and 3 that will follow in the rest of the workshop. And we will develop an environmental and sustainable management system. So we will help ports, we will give them tools and processes to go to a more sustainable and smart future. Yes, thank you. So what is all the fuss about? Why are we doing this? First of all, we want to provide the system to help the inland ports transition to a more sustainable and smart future. And what we mean with sustainable, First of all, we don't only refer to the environmental sustainability, so reduce the emissions, improve the water quality, improve the soil quality, but also we want the ports to remain business sustainable, and we would also like them to become a part of their social sustainability, because inland ports very frequently are very close to cities. So as a part of the stakeholders around them, ports can use the ESMS to improve their social responsibility. And the second component has to do with the ports becoming smarter. So making sure that inland ports keep up to date with all the technological developments, such as digitalisation, automation of the equipment, but also that they can offer innovative services, or they can help in fostering inland waterway services, that they are smart, that they have zero emissions, etc. Can you go to the next slide, please? But first of all, what do we mean with environmental sustainable management system? What is an ESMS? It is a system that provides a set of processes and tools that help ports, inland ports, first of all, monitor their environmental impact in all the aspects, not only emissions, but also water quality, soil quality, noise. It also has to do with the processes inside the port, making sure that there are people and employees that they have roles, environmental roles assigned, taking, of course, into account the size of the port, and making sure that there is always enough and financial and human resources to follow this system. We provide the ESMS tool provides guidance to the port to make sure that they are always in compliance with the regulations, that they are always able to communicate properly to the stakeholders, external stakeholders in the society, what they're doing, what are their goals, and what are their actions. Of course, it provides guidance in the ports to set their environmental and social responsibility goals, and to develop a set of actions, work plan and roadmap, however you would like to define it, to make sure that these goals are met. Can you please change the slide? Okay, yes. As Jasper said, we are in the initial phase. So what we are doing, apart from getting all the inputs that we already get from the various, from the other tasks, we are also looking into systems that are already there, not only for ports, for inland ports, but also for ports in general. So we are not planning to reinvent the wheels. We would like to get as inspirations already existing tools, especially from maritime ports. And we aim to develop our system in a way that it's first of all practical to use. We understand that when we talk about inland port, there are many types of ports, different types of geographical locations, sizes, operations or activities, main activities. So we will follow a modular approach with different modules that can be implemented in the various cases. So one port could implement one module, more, depending on the size and on the ability of the port. And also we aim to make the system and parts of the systems as more qualitative as possible. So we acknowledge the fact that sometimes, especially for small ports, it is very difficult to have data, to have information. Or, for example, you already mentioned the landlord of a port, of an inland port. So we would like to also give some qualitative modules and processes to help them guide their way through sustainability. And we make sure, of course, that we give them a path to develop their own sustainability goals, and also to help them achieve them. Our approach consists of two different modules. The first one has to do with the content, with the solutions, with the data, with the tools that they're already there available. And the second one has to do with the process. So we help them develop a process, an ESMS process. I have a question. I would like to reply to the questions later, but yeah, please. There is a raised hand. Or
Yeah.
yeah. In the meantime, can you change the slide? Otherwise, I can continue. Okay, I will continue, and once I finish, then okay. So as I said before, one component has to do with the content module. Where that it's divided in different sub-modules, I will say. First of all, we provide the ports with a list of different solutions that they have to do with how they can improve their environmental performance, for example, via making equipment electrification, or offering onshore electricity to the vessels. The second one deals with the instruments that that they help ports monitor their performance, and also data sets, default factors that they can be used. Some of them have already been presented in task 1. The third one has to do with models. Models again to help him calculate their performance, also environmentally, but also models on how they can engage the local stakeholders, for example. All this can be included in this sub-module. And finally, there is a sub-module with the best practices, either on services that they have already been developed, or solutions, environmental solutions already applied by the port, from which a port can choose. They can learn from their from other ports that probably they have the same size, or that they can relate, let's say, from their fellow ports, inland ports, that they can relate to them. Sorry, I always refer to inland ports, but sometimes I just say ports. And can we go to the next slide, please? And the second module has to do with the process. In the first step, we are proposing a self-assessment method. This method, it's nothing more than a set of questions that they deal with how ports monitor their environmental performance, if they have and they can be if they have set environmental goals, which solution they are implementing, and which set of actions they are planning to do. These questions can be as simple as have you a person assigned, an employee assigned for the environmental management, or more complicated, of which are in the coming future, for example, which are the set of actions you are planning to take, or are you monitor your emissions? Do you have data? Do you implement some specific models? Based on this questionnaire, on this set of questions, depending on the number of the yes and the no, the board can identify what is the current situation. So in which situation am I? Then from the module list, from the content module that I referred to before, it can get one solution or some actions. Talking to the local stakeholders, it's not necessary for all the actions, but for some of them it might be. Then the inland port can go into can finalize, let's say, the final set of action, and then there is the evaluation stage. Will maybe for a simple CBA analysis or feasibility study, the board can see if this action is applicable, it makes sense business-wise, and then apply it, and then we can repeat the circle again and again, so it can again be assess itself, see if there is an improvement in the environmental, in the performance, in all the aspects, and then we go again, identifying the action, discussing with the stakeholders, evaluation, and the circle goes again and again. This is our initial approach. This is how we have been thinking to approach the ESMS development. What we are planning to do is apply the modules, not all of them, some of the modules into pilot ports. So if this is something that you will be interested into doing, please contact us and improve it together with the ports, and making sure that it is a system that it can be first of all, valuable, helpful for the ports, it can be applicable, and also that it can cover different types of ports, sizes, locations, as I referred, and different type of activities. I still see the hand raised, so please, otherwise I have some questions for you.
Yeah, Werner Auer has raised his hand. Please, the floor is yours. If you can, yeah.
Sorry, this must be a misfunction. Sorry.
Okay, okay, no worries. So I would like to give you the floor and ask you, what do you think is required to make an inland port more, I would go first to the second question, more business, socially and environmentally sustainable? What do you think from your, it's a very open question. From your experience, I see that we have many inland ports as participants. What do you think, which actions do you think that your specific port could take to become more sustainable in these three aspects?
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. So indeed, you listed here these 4 questions on the slide. If you would like to react, this is here we have prepared a question in Mentimeter, so it's just meant to be a very open floor discussion. Please raise your hand and feel free to react. I do think what is the most important aspect or the challenge also, where we would like to hear your feedback, of course, is on the one hand, you want to, and this is also, Joanna, I think why you have designed this process module and this content module, right? On the one hand, you would like to have a system which takes, let's say, the circumstances of inlet ports into account. There it is challenges given that there is such a wide variation. It was already discussed under the previous presentation. Such a wide variation of structures present within the let's say well, across the 10 inland ports and across terminal operators. Therefore, this content module, I think, is also linking towards the results of the previous talk, so the good practices feed into there, but also the model that we just discussed to create this environmental performance and to establish this baseline. And I think your feedback or the feedback from participants will also be helpful here to better understand to which extent such a system should be developed in your detail. What are the specific needs? What are the specific questions that should be answered? And indeed, in the end, what do you think needs to be included in such a system so that it can provide proper guidance for ports to become smarter? So this is, I think, Johanna, if I build upon what you're saying, where we would like to seek your feedback, and we would like to seek the feedback of the participants.
Sometimes if you feel you cannot reply, I know maybe the microphone is not working, please write something in the chat. Do you believe that this is an ESMS system in general would be useful for an inland port? Having in mind again that this is something that can be customized. It doesn't mean that an ESMS that it is applied in a very big port, inland port, cannot be customized or cannot have some components applied in a smaller inland port. Do you think that it's going to help, that it's going to provide guidance for the inland port to become more sustainable, more smarter, let's say, keep up to date with technological developments, making sure that the inland port is working closely, let's say, with the local community?
Yeah, thanks. Let's label this as the final opportunity to ask a question or to raise a hand or to reply to the questions that have been put on the screen. Maybe important to note is that task 4 is commencing next year. So these are the first ideas that Johanna has presented. And obviously, this will be developed further over the next couple of month towards 2024, where it will be tested in a pilot, or towards next year when it will be tested in pilot environments and in pilot projects. We are also gonna, this is also a little bit for later on the workshop, but we're gonna have events in the autumn. We're having a joint event with Magpie in Wesel in September. We're going to be on the program of the Danube Ports Days that ProDanube, that Robert is organizing. Well, as Tori introduced in his introduction, we're looking for another event with AVIP, and these will also be opportunities for us to meet with you, to develop our approach further, and to further brainstorm with you on this topic. So this was also on our side a kickoff of that discussion with you, with those events that we will have in the fall. I think we have one question in the chat or a comment.
Great.
Yeah, great approach. As a port authority, I find it challenging to include and encourage all port companies to join and engage. Yeah, that's a common challenge indeed.
Yes. That's why we also plan to have to include some stakeholder engagement models and ways that a port can do that.
Yeah. That's a very good addition indeed. Are there other comments, questions before we proceed to our coffee break? If not, thanks, Joanna, for your first
Thank you.
introduction.
Thank you, Jasper.
Indeed.
Thank you all.
Thank you. A conversation that will be continued into the fall. Then, okay, the next slide is the coffee break. After the coffee break, we will have a discussion on digitalisation, a presentation that will be provided by Robert Raphael from Predenium. We'll also have a presentation on urban and short-range IWT. Planco has done some extensive work there, and will present their results. And obviously, we will looking for your input to identify the rollout potential. So it should be an interesting program after the break. But let's have a brief coffee break for you to get some coffee, water, bring a quick visit to the bathroom, and then we hope to see you back at 11:20 for the final two presentations in the workshop. So now time for a coffee break, and see you back at 11:20. All right, it is 11:20. So let's get started again. Welcome back. I do think we have an interesting program for you after the coffee break. We'll be focusing on digitalization within inland ports and on short and urban range IWT. First, I'll be giving the floor to, so Laila, if you can move to the next slide. First, I'll be giving the floor to Robert. Robert Raphael from Prodenu will further go into the results, the research that we did on digital solutions for sustainable port development. So Robert, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome and best regards from the currently sunny Vienna, but weather is changing every hour in the past days. It is my pleasure to present the results what we have so far elaborated with my colleagues around the virtual table, Charlotte, Sasha, and Christian from the Prodanube team, and also happy to see some Prodanube members around in the Teams meeting. If we go to the next slide, I can already introduce the objectives and the content of this task, which seems easy because digitalization is actually in the discussion of each and every project, I assume, not only when it comes to ports, but in many other fields. But that also makes it challenging to bring something new. And this is what this project is about. What can the digitalization do for assessing the greening possibilities and the greening levels of ports, and also to give ideas and roll out a master plan. This master plan will be based on assessing the regulatory framework. That part is mostly closed on the European level. I will come back to that. And we had the challenging task with several desk research, the survey, and inventories and interviews to look for good practices, which are not, let's say, the usual digital good practices, but the things which can contribute to the greening or have a greening aspect as well. And also to give ideas on the process optimization and interoperability improvements and challenges. These are the main building blocks, and on the next slide, you can already see that the regulatory framework analysis has been done on the European and international level so far, which confirms, so to say, our assumption that there are currently no binding legislation or legal norms that specifically deal with the digitalization of the ports. However, our colleagues made in the task an extensive analysis on those general acts and norms which define the methodologies or which give the framework for software solutions in general. This you see on the screen. I will not read out, but we will check again, although we already have some assumptions, how it looks like on the member states level. This is an easy statement that currently there are no such legislation, but of course this also implicitly answers part of this project's question, that if there are no binding prescriptions for digitalization in the ports, then it means that there are currently also no binding prescriptions for the environmental aspects of digitalization. However, if we go to the next slide, however, in the first survey, which was rolled out last year and analyzed last year, we have already experienced that there are quite some ports which have an eye on the greening aspects besides the usual terminal operations, cargo management, transport management, traffic management in the ports, or statistics. Quite some of you, maybe also from the ones around the table here, have an eye on, for example, the fuel consumption caused inside a port environment. Water quality and air quality were also parts of our questions. You see on the bottom right screenshot that it was not yet the case, but in the meantime, we also gained some other interview results and good practices. There are already some elements in progress. So based on that, we can define that, or we can state that digitalization is more or less a topic in each and every port on a certain level, but environmental digitalization, if I can say so, or digitalization of the environmental management tools is also high on the agenda in quite some number of ports. On the next slide, we have outlined, and that is our current work, we have outlined what aspects we were collecting so far in our teamwork on the process optimization and the interoperability improvement. Again, I will not read out all these lists, but you can see that as I started with, digitalization seems, or here's an easy topic, but there are so many bits and pieces which need to come together, which needs to interoperably be run and managed to make a benefit out of the users. So one statement here could be that digitalization should not only be for itself, but it should be, so to say, a background, an enable or a basic service to create value-added services for the landlord, for the tenant, for even maybe the truck driver, the vessel operators, and also satisfying some reporting requirements if there are or if there will be any. All this relates to the usual aspects, cybersecurity, data privacy, and so on and so on. But it also relates to several other questions, not to mention too many details, but there are already several tools, digital tools being run inside the same port when it comes to river information services, when it comes to terminal operation systems, when it comes to any kind of booking platform, which all have nearly the same data inside, but they are not necessarily yet interoperable, or necessarily there is not yet a data exchange between all those. That's for sure going to be a recommendation to harmonize these and pick those elements from the list which can contribute to assess or improve greening. On the next slide, or actually slides, you will see that what I was telling in the past minutes was partially based on survey results, partially based on desk research, and quite some interviews from all over the world, so to say. So there is a visual summary in this slide and on the next slide as well, that there so far we have already collected more than 20 good practices from different regions, Europe and international, which include, or which have at least an eye on the greening aspects in ports. This comes from, if we want to select on the next slide from the overview, this comes in a good practice, or a list of good practices with some fact sheets for this, which seeking the approval of the DG Move experts, hopefully in the upcoming 1-2 days. Those will be soon presented on the project website. But those what we found are some which are, let's say, business as usual port community systems, but there are already some which have in the background environmental sensors, weather sensors, pollution sensors, and these are then being, the data collected with those are being used and displayed on different types of dashboards for the port management, for the port decision makers, and also for reporting. So it's quite a learning for us as well. And these will also be made, of course, considering the privacy requests or the publicity requests from some ports. You will be able to check those quite soon on the project website. In the next slide, or on the next slide, you will see our major takeaway, or the skeleton for the major takeaway, a digitalization master plan for inland ports and terminals with a vision on the greening. This is something which we will present in more details at the Danube Ports Days. This is work in progress, which started in the recent weeks. But important to highlight that we will try to obviously go beyond the usual digitalization perspectives and concentrate on what digitalization can do for greening, for environmental conformity, and for self-assessment, for example. On the next one, or actually with the next one, we already have opened the 10 minutes question and answers session. Very important task currently also running to analyze gaps and barriers. Again, not necessarily only in the digitalization field, because that might be, how to say, discussed. I mean, we all know it's being discussed in several years, but from the greening perspective. And it would be highly welcome if, using the QR code on the screen back to the Mentimeter tool, if you would be able to drop in some keywords, what you miss, what you find as main barrier in front of introducing and or using digital tools, having in mind the greening, the environmental perspective. So we said that we let this open for a minute or two and see what first ideas come to the digital platform. So the floor is yours on the Mentimeter. The code you see up on the screen, the QR code you see at the left bottom of the screen. Happy to receive your inputs.
Yeah, thanks, Robert, for your presentation. Indeed, also for the introduction of this question. Indeed, feel free to include your response, your input. Feel free to drop your input also in the chat. That is fine as well, or to indeed raise your hand and introduce your point verbally. Yeah, there are a couple of barriers, I think, already commonly identified, right, Robert? When it comes to, for instance, what is it? Number of examples on what is it, standardization or stakeholder engagement, or when it comes to the business case. Such are quite common barriers, I think, that we hear back in, well, not only this project, actually in many other projects, obviously, and initiatives as well. There's a first response.
Yeah, fully with you. If I can ask the colleagues, somewhere I said, okay, great, that the QR code. Yep, this is something, the first input, what I see for me on the left-hand side, too many data to add. I think that's a learning from all of us, and this is already coming back in the interviews. Nevertheless, thank you very much for highlighting that. This is something which I tried to mention before, that there are maybe, I would dare to speak it out loud. Maybe in some cases there are already too many tools available, and not only in one tool you need to type in your vessel name or type of port or tenant, but in several tools. So this is the process optimization and integration and interoperability topic, which currently makes us quite a challenge in the project. Lack of management capacity and project management capacity internally. Thank you for noting that. I think that is also a topic or a problem which comes, but maybe there I would say not only for the digitalization and greening, but overall staff shortages could cause challenges. Yeah, the third, or at least for me, the third point from the left-hand side, the interfaces, platforms, I think it relates back to what we just discussed, that there are already several types, several solutions, several software, but these need to be interoperable, and as much data that is already existing, for example, in river information services, those should be retrieved for that, and really just the very specific information should be added additionally, and in the ideal case once. So once we know how a port looks like, that can feed in, and then only the current activities could be or should be monitored. The personal topic and the specific benefits for the company, very important point. Thank you for highlighting that. If I remember correctly, I mentioned that digitalization should not only, and also greening in general, should not only be for itself, but it should also deliver benefits for all the stakeholders around the table, which relates to the number 5, or at least for me, number 5, too many stakeholders. Also very good point. It needs to be defined who is doing what, and the what shall only be done by, ideal case, by one person, digital, or one entity, so to say. And I think digitalization can also help in that if you have a central tool with proper access rights, and that could be then, or there should be then, a one-stop shop for these. Mental barriers, skilled workforce, I think that comes actually good together with the upper lines. Lack of showcases and dissemination of good practices. I think it meant to be, but maybe the character limit. Thank you for pointing that out. These 21 or 22, what we already have, and if more pop up during the project, will be made transparent and available on the website in the upcoming weeks. So I think you will all receive an update from that, and very much with you. If it works fine, don't ruin it with novelties. Clear. Operational depths are overwhelmed to design and implement solutions. Yeah, if I might translate it in a way that it also speaks for some kind of a limited number of tools and with high level of harmonization and interoperability and synergies that could reduce operational workload and costs, and then you don't need to design and implement different solutions. I think it seems that these were the inputs. Great ones. Thank you very much for that. I think we will reflect all of these in the upcoming deliverables of the task 3.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Something to look forward to. Yeah, you had listed a number of questions on the next slide, but I do think those have been topics that, well, largely in our discussions have already been covered, right?
Absolutely. I'm grateful for these 7 inputs, or during the meeting still I will be monitoring the normal Teams chat, or you can reach out. These were indeed kind of backup questions, but those have more or less, or you are reading our minds, so to say, dear colleagues around the table. So already very good inputs in the Mentimeter. So then I think we have exactly made it on time with task 3, and that then leads us to say thank you again, and happy to be in touch with all of you in the next years as well.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Running like a Swiss clock, indeed. Thanks for your presentation. Thanks to indeed the 7 responses. Those are indeed very helpful, as Robert already indicated. And we keep available, but we also highlight that indeed in the end, then there'll be opportunities for follow up. Then if we go to the next slide, I would like to introduce Max Wijnald from Planco, who will further look into the work that we've done for good practices on urban and short range IWT and present the lessons learned from those good practices. So Max, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jasper. Yes, I would like to give you a short introduction into our investigation on the potential of urban and short-range inland waterway transport services. For this investigation, we did a selection of 20 good practice cases that you can see on the next slide. Thank you. Yes, we conducted several interviews with important stakeholders and operators within these cases to learn more about this market segment. The results of the interviews, as well as additional research, formed the basis for our analysis of the good practice cases. For each good practice case, we created one good practice case profile that highlights several aspects like the administrative requirements, cargo or passenger flows, infrastructure conditions, vessels, logistical aspects, the competitive position, as well as the business model. As you can see here in the table, our selection tries to cover all relevant waterway regions within Europe, for example, the Danube, the Rhine, France, Germany, and other regions, as well as the important market segments in this field, like the transportation of construction materials, waste disposal, retail, parcel deliveries, transport of containers, and passengers. The next slide, please. Thank you. The results of the various good practice cases can be summarized in success factors that represent important aspects in the implementation of comparable cases and can be taken away as lessons learned from looking at examples. Here we have to distinguish between freight cases and also passenger cases. The following success factors apply to freight cases. For example, it has been shown that regulatory measures that restrict or impose challenges or conditions on truck traffic, like, for example, in form of the environmental regulations, can strengthen the competitive situation of urban or short-range inland waterway transport and create a need for alternative logistical solutions, tendering procedures that create a tool for creating incentives or conditions that strengthens also the inland waterway transport are very important. This is especially the case. This was especially the case for public infrastructure construction projects like the construction on the Grand Paris Express. Cooperation with other stakeholders, including public ones, is quite important. This is, for example, the case in the search for transshipment areas, as different interests have to be weighed against each other here, especially in densely populated urban areas. Services that manage to serve larger clients, like in our cases, in our good practice cases for PRI, Geodis, or Akia, has the advantage of less volatile transport volumes and therefore achieve more efficient cargo capacity utilization. Despite that, despite the overarching success factors, there are also local different conditions like difficult navigational conditions or a lack of transshipment sites. Here, the services have to be tailored on those conditions. Concepts that help services to adapt to those conditions, for example, are lower ship units, onboard cranes, or micro hubs. We have to also consider success factors that apply to passenger cases. One challenge in waterborne urban public passenger transport are the relatively high costs compared to other modes of public transport. This has been shown in discussions with operators. Public waterborne passenger transport, therefore, have to fulfill some certain function or have an added value that justifies those relatively high operation costs. Here also it can help that waterborne passenger transport has an additional value for leisure passengers like tourists. Also, the integration into the public transport network, including the fare system, unlocks positive complementary effects. These success factors are a selection of our main results from the good practice case analysis. And with that, I would like to come to the next slide. Once the analysis of the good practice case analysis has been completed, a quantitative estimate on the rollout potential for comparable cases is pending. This requires a methodological framework that is currently under development. A distinction must be made here between urban and short-range cases with correlating market segments. Also, the insights and figures that we were able to learn from the good practice cases have to be anticipated within this methodological framework. First step for our methodological framework is to define total transport volumes that are relevant for this market segment due to the geographical proximity to waterways. This total transport volume will apply to all modes of transport. A second step then is to develop model shares based on our experience with good practice cases that apply to those total transport volumes and will be used to calculate the shifts between different modes of transport to waterborne transport. With that, I would like to come to the next slide that shows a more detailed subdivision into steps for this methodological framework, explaining it further. Like one of the first steps is to calculate population figures using population data and data on land use within the vicinity of TEN-T ports and waterways. A second step will apply per capita quotas on that total transport volume to on that population data to calculate total transport volumes. Per capita quotas can be developed per segment, like for waste disposal, parcel deliveries, or construction materials. The third step is the development of model shares to identify the transport volumes for urban inland waterway transport. And the final step, the fourth step, is to develop growth scenarios, for example, regarding growth population to further show the potential in the future. All these steps should lead to the quantitative estimation of potential figures for urban and short-range inland waterway transport. On the next slide, we have an example that we calculate to illustrate the initial steps within this methodological framework further. You can see the Westhafen in Berlin, one of the TEN-T ports, and red-coded areas that are residential zones that lie within the vicinity of 3 kilometers to the waterway, that lie above a certain threshold of population density. This was calculated by an algorithm that uses population data from Eurostats on NUTS3 regional level, as well using geographical data about residential zones from OpenStreetMap to create a distribution model for the population and checking the vicinity of waterways to calculate a number of people or inhabitants that are living within this service area of a potential inland waterway transport service. This number is, in this example, almost 2 million people here for Berlin. This algorithm can be applied to any other 10T port as well to further calculate the total transport volumes. There are still some questions here to answer. For example, the parameters are to set up for this calculation. For that, we will use our experience from the good practice cases, but we are also interested in your opinion. That's why we prepared 4 Mentimeter questions. But before that, I would be open for any feedback or questions you have.
Thank you, Max. No hands raised currently in the meeting, or I don't think any comments in the chat either. So let's pause 10 seconds for everyone to be given the full opportunity. And otherwise, I think you can proceed to your Menti questions.
Yeah.
Maybe Laila can turn on the next slide.
So our first Mentimeter question is, what is the maximum last mile distance landside for the implementation of urban waterborne logistics? This question is regarding the vicinity and kilometers that are building up the potential service area for an urban inland waterway transport service. So if you have an opinion on that figures, feel free to share this so we have a roughly source of validation for our estimates.
Yeah, thanks, Max. What is or most of the answers actually do seem to tend towards 5, towards 10 kilometers.
Yeah, that shows us that we can maybe increase the radius that we are looking at for the moment in the initial calculations that we used as example here.
Yeah, because in the initial calculations you have used or you have worked with a lower range.
Yes. Yes.
And of course, it's maybe also a little bit of technical question, right?
Yeah.
But also here the opinion in terms of what should be the landslide. If any of you do have an opinion on that, feedback, feel free to speak up and provide your input. I do think you have a similar question also on the next slide, right?
Yeah, maybe we can proceed. Yes. Here, your opinion is very important for us. Where do you see the potential for the urban inland waterway transport services, like in the example before? What do you model share? What model share do you expect for the inland waterway transport and urban freight transport by 2030? Here, your opinion also will be, is a roughly source of validation for our calculations, and yes, so feel free to impose your opinion here.
Thank you. We have also been raising similar questions in the survey.
Yes.
And I think, well, we closed it on Monday, so I think we're still analyzing your responses over there. But yeah. I think, Max, the responses to the survey together with the responses to this Mentimeter should provide a good basis for, well, your calculations and determining the rollout potential. So feel free to provide your input. Very, very helpful.
Yeah. Also, we will use our experience from the good practice cases here to calculate initial model shares to have an empirical basis for our analysis. There was a question from Roy van den Berg. Yeah, it for example, it can depend on which mode of transport you use for last mile operation. For example, cargo bikes or trucks, they deliver different ranges. That is correctly pointed out here.
Yeah, indeed. Let's go to the next slide. I would propose. We're at the 6 responses.
Yeah. This is a similar question like before, but regarding short-range transport, as mentioned, we have to look at both sides. Here for us, it's interesting if the estimation on the potential is a different one for urban transport cases, is expectation on short-range cases more optimistic or less optimistic than in urban cases?
Yeah, and there indeed seems to be a deviation.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you have a final question?
Yeah, regarding passenger transport. Yeah, what is your view on the potential for urban passenger inland waterway transport? Yeah, maybe where urban passenger inland waterway transport can create an added value for public transport networks. It has already been established. If you have this opinion or any other, please share your verbally any other opinions you have on that topic.
Yeah, thank you, Max. And I think this is also your final question, right? So this is also an opportunity for everyone that if you have questions for Max, feedback, input, anything you would like to point out, indeed, as for the other presentations, feel free to reach out with us afterwards. But if there's anything that you would like to share right now in this meeting, this is also the opportunity for you to do that. If there are no hands raised or no further questions, then Max, are there any final considerations from your side? Final conclusions?
I think I'm quite optimistic with the results from the Mentimeter questions, and yes, we presented what we will do for now on, developing further the methodological framework and then do our calculations to develop a quantitative estimate on the road potential.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thanks to all of you who provided your input and your feedback. I would then like to conclude the session today. So if you can stay with us for 5 minutes, we'll wrap up and share the main conclusions, or actually the main next steps. If you go to the next slide, Laila. This slide has basically highlighted what are the next steps for our study. So today, Nicole, the C-Delft team, has presented the tool that they are developing, obviously currently under validation. At a certain stage, towards the next couple of months, towards the end of the summer, it will be published on the Green Inland Ports website in a user-friendly format to use. So keep an eye out on our website, and obviously until then, but also afterwards, we'll be very looking forward to receiving your feedback on that tool. Same applies to task 2. The Blanco team, Max, they've written a extensive deliverable on these group practices, and lesson learned. This good practice or this deliverable will be published on our website. We are already publishing the analysis for some specific good practices as case studies, as news items on the website. And they receive quite a good engagement rate. So we invite you to be keeping an eye out on those as well. But as Max introduced, your feedback will be input for the identification of the rollout potential, which is the next step for this task 2. Then when we go to task 3, also here, the work that we did, the work that Robert presented, will be soon published on the website. And also here we will highlight specific good practices, and we will present them as news items and case study. An important next step is the drafting of the digitalisation master plan. And obviously, this is also a conversation that we will have with you in the fall in our events that we will organize by then. Then task 4. First ideas were presented today. This methodology, self-assessment methodology, this methodology for the ESMS with the content module and the process model will be further finalized using your input over the next couple of months. And then towards next year, those environmental and sustainable management systems will be tested and implemented in pilot projects. And like Joanna already said, if you're interested to participate with us, or if you're interested to know more about this phase of the project, feel free to be reached out with us. We're happy to provide you with more details. Then finally, on the next slide, there are a number of events listed that will take place after the summer. So together with the Magpie project, as already introduced, collaboration with other projects is key to our project as well. So with the Magpie project, we're co-organizing and participating in a workshop that will take place on the 17th and 18th of September in Wesel, Germany. So you're very welcome to come to that workshop and to participate with us over there. Then on the 29th and the 30th of October, we will be part of the program of the Danube Ports Days that the Pro-Danube team were organized in Budapest in Hungary. So also there you're very welcome to join with us, and we'll organize the date is to be determined, but please keep an eye out on the website. We'll organize an event jointly together with AVIP. Events in 2025, there will be, oh, sorry, if you can go back, thank you. Events in 2025 will be organized together with pilot projects, so those are due to be determined. And indeed, we very much like to hear your views, so feel free to reach out with us. We can always schedule an interview or a conversation to discuss this project. We also have a website. I already introduced everything that we will publish on the website. Please keep an eye out on that. A LinkedIn, which you're invited to follow. We'll also publish a lot of good practices on our LinkedIn, and a functional mailbox, which you can reach out with in case of questions about this project. Then on the next slide, we'd like to hear your feedback. So feel free to reach out with us as already introduced, but also feel free to scan this QR code, because it will be good for us. I think there are 3 to 4 questions included there. It will be good to ask your feedback to the event, whether you liked it, whether you don't like it. Feel free to highlight well, the positive elements, but also what you think should be improved or what you would like to see better. And next time that we're organizing this event for you. So that is the final slide of this workshop, of this presentation. Leaves me to say thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you very much for devoting the 2 hours to this online workshop on behalf of the entire team. Looking forward to seeing you in person, hopefully towards the fall in one of the events that will be organized. And well, wishing you a nice rest of the day this afternoon. So thank you again. Feel free to complete this short questionnaire, and see you hopefully later this year for this study or for other initiatives. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.